Hi, everybody. My name is Zeb Wellborn, president of the Chino Valley Chamber of Commerce. Today, I'm here with Kami Welch from the Arvada Chamber. Kami, can you tell me a little bit about how long you've been in the chamber industry?
There's what it feels like and what it actually is. So what it actually is 14 years. So I've been with two different chambers during that time, almost 10 years in my current role. During the pandemic, it felt like I'd been doing this for about 25 years. So it's been a busy, long journey for sure.
Well, you've done some phenomenal work at your chamber, and you and I have come across each other in a couple of different places. And I just want to say that I look up to you a lot in the work that you do in the chamber industry. So you're doing phenomenal things. And one of the things that I wanted to chat with you about today was your bold, I don't know if you call it initiative or campaign, but that was something that was very, very cool to see. And also, I'd love to learn how you did it. So talk to me a little bit about your bold campaign. Like, let's just start with what it is. What is your bold initiative?
Yeah, so BOLD stands for Big Opportunities for Leaders to Deliver. And the full name of it is BOLD 2026. And so the idea behind it is that we've set a 5-year vision for our community. And it's just what it sounds like. We want our leaders to step up in new and different ways to ensure that our community really can shine. And when we talk about leaders, I'm not just talking about our elected leaders or that traditional sense. It's our business community holistically. It's our nonprofit partners. It's everybody that has a stake in community and economic development, kind of rowing our boat in the same direction. That's the heart of the BOLD initiative, is that we are aligning and marching together to solve the most critical challenges facing our community.
Okay, so how did that come about? Like, talking about the ideation of this, like, how did this get started?
Yeah, so long journey, as are many of these things. It's systems work that we're talking about. So that always takes a while. So we actually started in 2017, really in the talent space. And so we were hearing from our employers on a very regular basis that they were struggling to find the talent they needed, to retain that talent. Usually when they got them, they didn't have the skills that those employers were looking for. And so we saw this huge pain point, which I know is not news to anybody. This is a challenge that I think every business, every community is facing. But we were really trying to figure out, how does this look? How do we roll up our sleeves and really start solving this issue? And so we tried a variety of different things for many years and ultimately kept running into kind of this barrier of resources. We didn't have enough staff. We didn't have enough money to be able to buy the programs and the software and the things we needed to actually work towards system solutions for the talent space. So we decided, our board decided that we needed to take a step back and really say, if we could truly solve what our community needed, how does that look? And what kind of resources would we need? And is that what our community actually wants us to be doing? So that has been kind of this journey that we've gotten to, of running a feasibility study and then launching a campaign to support those resources. And now we're in full-fledged implementation. And I'm happy to unpack the details of each of those phases, because they all were a huge learning experience for us, but so critical to the journey that got us to this point where we're actually now like delivering on things. And it's so exciting to see outcomes coming to fruition and people seeing that it does work when there really is a team effort around it.
Yeah, no, it sounds very exciting. Talk to me about that feasibility study. So like, what did that look like? How did you determine that this was a viable thing? How did that come to fruition?
Yeah, so the first step was really a conversation with my board of directors and discussing, what do we want to be? Are we okay being where we are today and kind of just paddling along? Or do we want to be bigger, better? Our mission as an organization is to solve the most critical challenges facing our businesses. And it started to feel like, if we're actually going to achieve that mission, we have to do more. So what we started with is putting out a request for proposal, looking for a company to actually help us do a feasibility study and potentially a campaign. We ended up hiring a company after doing a series of interviews and vetting called Power 10. They're an Atlanta-based company, but they travel all over the country and have done this type of work from coast to coast, which was amazing to have that breadth of experience. So what happened during the feasibility study is Power 10 supported us with some surveying of board members and key leaders, building a list of who those stakeholders are within our community that really care deeply about the success of our economy, of our community, and then conducting interviews with almost 50 of those stakeholders. So these are one-on-one hour-long interviews. And there's 3 things that are assessed in a feasibility study. The first is, do we have the issues right? Do we really understand what our community is facing? And I'll tell you that when we went through that process, we had identified talent. We'd identified the business environment, meaning advocacy, really, how are we supporting our businesses? And then we knew we needed another location to serve our businesses a little bit better. We didn't have training space in our community, and we saw some potential there. What came out of the feasibility study was some of the bullets that we had kind of like buried in there were actually some of the most important, and those being housing and childcare. So when people saw those, because we had them nestled under talent, realizing those were barriers to our talent system, but what our businesses and our key stakeholders said is those are key issues. People aren't coming to work for us because of the lack of affordable housing in this area. We know that's an issue. So through that feasibility study, we were able to redefine what the issues are for businesses. The feasibility also asked if the Arvada Chamber has the authority to do this. And I know that sounds a little bit scary of like authority. It's not intended to be scary, but do people trust that we are the type of organization that's ready and at the helm, willing to do this work? And that's important before jumping into this type of campaign. And then the third piece was an ask of those businesses, would they be willing to invest? Is this something that they care enough about to be willing to contribute, to be part of it, both of their time and treasure and their talent? So that is what the feasibility study assessed. Power 10 did all of that. So I was not involved in any of these interviews. So I was having like nightmares every night while I was thinking about what people might have been saying on these calls. But ultimately what came back was a green light, that our community did believe that we'd identified the right issues with some small tweaks to it, that they trusted that we were the right organization at the right time to do this work, and that they were willing to step up and invest in that process. So that is what comes out of a feasibility study.
Yeah, so it's interesting, like the parallels. I feel like we're like on that beginning, because I had that chat very recently with our board of directors. Like, what do we want this to look like in 5 years, and what are the things that we should think and work towards?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm imagining that happened the same for you. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to get that affirmation, right? It's like when you're in a room talking about it, it's really nice to have that like external feedback that both verifies and pushes back on things to make sure that you get to the right place.
Yeah, so this company that you hired, this Power 10, talk a little bit about that experience. How did it work the way you anticipated? Was it better? Was it worse? Was there things that you wish you would have done differently?
It was better, but I would be lying if I didn't say it was a nerve-wracking experience. I mean, for us, this was brand new, and asking people to think about investment and asking if they do truly trust us as an organization was a really scary process. I appreciated having a third party to help us with that and to be able to provide that candid feedback along the way. And they're pros, as I said, they do this coast to coast. And so this isn't the first time they've done it. And so they're like, calm down, it's going to be okay. And so they gave me a level of confidence. And ultimately for them, because what they do is they run these campaigns. Like if you decide to move forward, so they want to see this be successful. So what I appreciated about the process is their commitment to making sure we had a draft plan ready to go for those feasibility study interviews was a part of that commitment, which was huge, is helping us to design what we needed to be talking to people about so that we could move it forward effectively.
Okay, so then they do this feasibility study. You've determined that that it has a viability. You're going to do it, and then you do the and then they're asking for the funds. Are you? So I know you said that they kind of handle all of that stuff, but how are you? There's got to be some integration there. Like, how are you? What's your role look like in that?
Yeah, so during the feasibility study, and I chose to own this for my organization, it could be anybody on the team. We scheduled all the interviews, we had the relationships. And so we did schedule that so that they just showed up with whoever from their team was going to do those feasibility study interviews. So we owned that part. And then as we moved into the campaign, that's when that I call it relationship capital is so important, right? The relationships you've built and I've built, that we are part of that. And so once you kind of vet through the feasibility study, you move into campaign development. And so for about 3 months after the feasibility study, we actually went back with that feedback we had to additional stakeholders. We were talking to government partners, other economic development partners, saying, okay, here's generally what we're thinking. Is this our lane? Is this supplemental to what you do? How can we be helpful? So there's a huge amount of that stakeholdering that happens. We also were getting quotes from partners that were verifying that, yes, this is the right work, right time. And we built what we called our case for support, which is posted on our website. And so anybody can find it there. It's really the guiding document of all of this work. But that takes a little bit of time. And I always tell people, we did small runs on that intentionally. So we would only print 30 to 50 copies at a time of that document because we wanted to be able to continue to take feedback, because that was the premise from the beginning of the feasibility study through the case development and all the way through the campaign, is this is for our community. And we want to continue to hear that feedback. And if somebody has major concerns, we need to think through that and adjust accordingly. So that was a really key kind of component for us, is collaboration and feedback to make sure we got to the right place.
Cool. And then I know you said that you've like housing was one of those things, childcare is one of those things you kind of uncovered in the process, but was there any other like big challenges that presented itself during that process where you're like, oh, I didn't expect that?
Yeah, I think to me, it was the gravity of the challenges that was really surprising. So we ended up with 4 goal areas at the very end. So we wanted to increase our talent pipeline. And so we wanted to see the number of unfilled positions going downward, really aligning demand and supply. We wanted to increase our stock of income aligned housing. So we call it income aligned because we think when we're talking about workforce housing has a little bit of a stigma, affordable housing has a stigma. And what we want to paint the picture of is we're talking about the people that work in our community, the people that are making your coffee and teaching your kids and putting the fires out. Like those are the people we want to live here. And so how do we ensure that? So we use income aligned. We want to increase our childcare capacity. One of the shockers in all of this was in Arvada alone, my community of 120,000 people, we need 2,000 more spots of childcare. Like shocking to me. And you think about that and how that relates to workforce and all those connection points. And then our 4th goal area was the business environment. And this is a bit encompassing because when we think of business environment, we're thinking about certainly the policy piece, both at the local, state, national level. We're also thinking about entrepreneurship and business resources and success. So we've kind of lumped those together because we think you have to have a successful business environment. The one thing that has been an aha for people as I talk to them is the interconnectedness of those issues. I think often we think about like, okay, yeah, talent's an issue and housing's an issue, but I am often telling people that you can't solve one without the other. So we're never going to fix talent if we can't take on housing and childcare. We just aren't. Like there's not enough people in our current world to fix it if we don't fix those other problems. So we have to look at those. If it's a crummy place to do business, none of it's going to work, right? So we've got to be thinking about the intersection. And I think that's one of the unique opportunities for chambers, is that we have that ability to convene across government, nonprofit, business, and bring those voices together. We're not siloed. We're not just a housing organization or just a childcare organization. We can cross all sorts of different conversations through an economic lens. And I think that is one of the key points of doing one of these bigger picture initiatives, is that you can think broader about how you communicate and why it's important.
Yeah, so just in terms of like my own learning in our own community, right? I'm trying to figure out how, and I think I might know that your answer to this question, but I like the data behind that. So you mentioned like you uncovered the childcare, there's 2,000 empty spots, and I think there's something similar, but like that's not something that I necessarily know. I did have a meeting recently where that data was kind of given to me, but it was given by somebody who was trying to seek funding for that. So you don't know how reliable that is. And then like the housing as well. Like where do you go to determine that says, hey, this is the actual need of those, and how do you get the data that supports that need so that you can share that confidently with your stakeholders that this is where we need to go?
Yeah, data has been a pretty interesting conundrum for us through this. And actually what we've spent the first 6 months of the like actual campaign implementation is getting really clear on data. We had good data, as you can see when you look at the case for support. We knew those numbers that I shared with you. We got most of them from stakeholders that do this work. So as you described, the people that are in that lane, and there is a little bit of trust and verification that is critical in that. And so we definitely cross-referenced. We looked at the national trends to make sure there was alignment. So we looked at a variety of different sources. We used Lightcast for a lot of our data collection, which is an awesome tool for those working in the talent space. We also used Placer, which does like cell phone triangulation data to look at some like workforce travel trends and things like that to help kind of tell the story. So we found really reputable sources that we were able to pull from. The other thing that was really helpful for us is every state's different, but we have an extraordinary state demographer here in Colorado And so we actually invited our state tomographer to come present to those who were investing in this work, as well as potential investors, and tell the story from the stage, exactly what we had found. She verified it and she goes, well, if I was a chamber, I would be taking on these 3 issues. And it was talent, housing, and childcare. And I was like, boom, right? Like, that's it. And so finding those sources that can say that because it's verified and they're confident in it has also been helpful. Where I said that it's been kind of a journey for this year is there was a lot of blind spots for us. So like when we think about housing, what we don't know is what our demand potential for our community is and our supply potential. How much do people need? And what do we have the capacity to build? That data doesn't exist anywhere. And so it's really hard for us to set performance metrics of we're going to increase by 300 units if we only have 100 units that we could actually build in our community, right? So there's some of that just hasn't been uncovered, but we consider that to be part of our work, is to figure out that mystery and outsource the, research that's needed to find that out.
Okay, so let's talk about the funding side of this. So you got this group together, you kind of presented this to stakeholders, and then they pitched it to you. Talk to me a little bit like who did the funding? How much was it? How was it broken out amongst the different stakeholders that you have? Can you shed some light on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So what ultimately happened is that we were assigned through Power 10 a development director who actually came out to our community 2 weeks out of the month. And we scheduled meetings during that time, which was really fun to go out. And so these were mostly people that we interviewed during the feasibility study, but we also worked with those like leaders in our community to say, who else should we be talking to, right? We built this big list and started to book meetings. So we would sit down with people and talk to them about the goal areas, understand how it's impacting their business and what needs to happen to basically help them feel confident to be a partner in this work. And so we had a ton of these meetings. We did end up with reaching our goal. So we initially were told we'd be able to do about 1.3 million for our community based on the feasibility study. As we built the plan and kind of spread our wings a little wider and went regional with our approach, we ended up increasing our goal to close to 1.75 with a really ambitious stretch goal of 2.725 million, saying that, okay, if we could reach that, then we could do all the things in this plan. We can really deliver big outcomes for our community and get our leaders engaged in really exceptional ways. So we were exceptionally surprised and delighted by the support of our community. We just announced a couple of weeks ago that we surpassed the $3 million mark in funds raised. We're done raising now. What I'll say is that was a pretty solid mix. We did have 43% of our businesses were those investors. 30% were public sector, so government dollars. And so we do think of this as a public-private partnership. I know in the chamber world, that's always a bit of a interesting conundrum of, do we take government money? Do we not? In this case, because of the type of work that we're doing, we think you have to. You have to be thinking about those government partners and that symbiotic relationship that needs to happen. The other pieces of it were foundation dollars. So a lot of our local foundations care deeply about our region, as well as this type of work. And it was unique for a chamber to be stepping up and saying, we see opportunities to fix this. And they were excited to be a partner in that work as we kind of tested concepts and engaged our private sector in new and different ways. So we had nearly 50 investors total, but the percentages kind of mapped out how I just shared.
Okay, so let me make sure I got it right. So it's 43% businesses, 40% public, and then 17% foundation?
30% public, and then the remainder is foundation.
Got it.
43, 30, and should have this 27%.
Cool. No, that's very exciting. And then, so you've got those. Now, has that been trickling in over time? Like, have you been implementing programming like that? Is there a clear start date for you? I mean, talk to me a little bit about implementation.
Yeah, so implementation started really as we were still selling the campaign, right? We knew what work needed to be done and we saw the potential to start working. And so we were kind of double doing it last year and like building the plane and flying it and making sure we had what we needed. This year, we got our staff onboarded. We were hiring 3 additional positions. 2 of them are filled. We're going to hire the 3rd later this quarter, which we're really excited about that. But the start and finish is a 5-year campaign. And so for most people, they made an annual investment. And so they would pay on an annual basis. And what we tell people is it's a pledge. this is equal parts you and I like committing to this work. And if we give up on our part, then you have every right to give up on your part, but we don't intend to do that, right? So we gave them that opportunity that if they felt like we were ever not delivering, that could be a conversation that we had. So we've been really cautious about how we communicate and articulate our outcomes, big and small, along the way of the Bold 2026 journey. So we do quarterly investor briefings. They get a quarterly report. They're getting custom talent reports in their inboxes. Like there's things we're doing to keep our investors, those partners who cared enough to do this work, heavily invested. The other thing that's important to note here is when we think about Bold 2026, it's not a membership program. It's not just for our investors. This is for our community at large. And so we want to make sure that we think holistically. And even though there's a certain small group that invested and they are going to get the VIP treatment and we're going to recognize them all the way through, everybody in our community benefits. And so we want to sing the praises of those who spent their own money to invest in something that will benefit our community holistically. So we often tell that story, which I think is really important.
Yeah, so like in the chamber industry, right? Like if we're securing sponsors or something, there's usually something that comes along with that. Is there like what are the things, or like you mentioned, you highlight them and stuff. What are the things that they get that make them want to sign up?
So some of it is the connection point. I mean, they're at the table, they're invited to these events. It's kind of exclusive in a way with others that care as much as they do. And the magic in that room is contagious, right? People are connecting. I love just walking around and hearing like them talking about housing and the issues they're facing and how they're solving them. So that network piece that they build with those that care just as deeply is huge. I think some of them, it is about like the brand recognition and the marketing and doing good, but it's less about that, right? That's not the thing that we ever heard anybody being like, when's my social media post coming, right? That's not the reason why. Most of these leaders want to see their community thrive, and they recognize that the pain is great for their company. And if they can be a leader in helping to solve that, then they are going to be a step ahead as a company. So there is a little bit of that altruistic mentality that many of these companies came at this with. And I'll be honest, like when we were thinking about who would invest and why they would invest, we were seeking those people that really understood that mentality of a rising tide lifts all boats. And so that is kind of the persona that we sought out as we were doing the campaign, is thinking about those people that genuinely know when the community is healthy, then everything thrives. We had a member the other day who said, we called to renew their membership, and somebody was like, thank you for renewing. And the member said back, well, of course I'd renew. Chambers of Commerce are how things get done. And I was like, yes, like that's right. Like that's what we want people to understand. So it's seeking those that get that and asking them to be a bigger part of it.
Cool. Like just like looking back and going through the whole process, start to finish. Is there anything that you would go back and do differently?
There's probably a ton of things I would do differently. Obviously, I'm so happy and proud of our entire community, my entire team, for the results that we got out of this. I mean, I don't take lightly the fact that it takes a lot of trust of our community put into our organization to invest in this way. And it's been years of work for many, many people to get to a place where our community invested in us in this way. I think as the leader of the organization, one of the things that I was cognizant of as we rolled this out was capacity. And so I held this very close because I wanted to make sure that I protected my team and our organization to continue to do the work that we needed to do. So on the membership side and events and advocacy, all of those things. And so I really kind of took a leadership role in this. In hindsight, I would have loved to bring my team in more fully to this project so they could share in some of these outcomes. My intentions initially were right, of trying to protect and allow them the opportunity to continue to focus on their work. But I think in hindsight, I would have loved for them to be able to celebrate and like the excitement. I didn't realize like how thrilling this would be for not just us, but for our entire community. And I felt like I got to kind of hog that, and that wasn't fair. And I wish I had done that a little bit differently. So.
Yeah, that's good. And then one of the things that I've done, so over my years, not my short years as a chamber president, I've kind of brought in some third-party vendors, I guess you'll say, to do kind of work with the chamber, and they have never worked out in a positive way. Is that so? So I guess my question for you is hiring that Power 10 group. Was that an easy decision? Or is it like a group that do you feel like it worked because it was your community? Do you feel like it would like totally fall flat somewhere else? Give me your thoughts or impressions on working with third parties to help do something like this.
Yeah, so I'm with you. I always was apprehensive about contractors for a really long time, but this was something that I knew that I probably couldn't do on my own. Like there's a level of accountability and structure and experience that comes along with having a third party. As I said, we didn't take that decision lightly. We did interview multiple firms that do this, and there's plenty of them out in the market. So I think part of what I always tell people is find that right personality match. And one of the things for Power 10 that felt different for me is they actually vetted us as well in that journey to say, okay, like I want to call, I want to understand where you are, what you're doing. They don't take every client on. It's not like the churn. And I actually really appreciated that because it made me feel like, well, if you're going to take us on, you're going to be committed to our success as well. So that for me was a differentiator in the process with them, as they took the time to really get to know us and make sure it was a good fit with them as a company. So I would say, in hindsight, yes, that was a very good decision to hire an outside company. I know a lot of people think they can do it themselves, but what happens is life is busy. And when you have that commitment and somebody that's checking in on you, and like I had that development director during the campaign out every 2 weeks, and we were paying for him to come out. And so if we weren't ready, if I didn't have meetings booked, that was a huge waste of money. So it kept us accountable all the way through to the success of it. So I totally get you, and I'm on the same page with those concerns, but this was probably one of the best decisions that we've made as an organization. And the investment obviously has paid dividends, and we're now going to be able to move forward in a really effective way as an organization without like me losing sleep every night because I don't know how I'm going to fund the work we need to do. It's amazing.
It is, and it's a testament to the your reputation, you being the leader of the organization, and then that's a big investment into you as well as the organization as a whole. So that's pretty phenomenal. How about outcomes? Like what? So with this $3 million of funding, what does the end of that 5-year plan look like? What are the accomplishments that you're hoping to achieve?
Yeah. So part of actually when we pitched this to people and talked to them about investing is we talked a lot about what they would see. And as I said, some of the data was missing and is still missing for us to really set clear targets. And so that's really the next step on our journey right now, is making sure we have a really clear dashboard for each of the goal areas of how do we know when we're making progress. And so for example, in talent, we've identified the top jobs in our region, and we want to track the number of unfilled positions within that. And so we should be able to see that go downward. Now, we realize there's a lot of factors that can play into that, right? Of like reductions in force and other things that can happen. And so we understand the complicated nature of what we're measuring and that there's a holistic story to tell. So we should see things generally trending in the right direction as far as like more housing stock, more childcare spots, a decrease in the number of unfilled positions. But we also need to track some macroeconomic trends and make sure that we are tracking our unemployment rates, that we're tracking vacancy rates and sales tax revenue. All of those things also are kind of these overarching metrics that we need to look at from a health. Like, are the things we're doing actually affecting our economy in the right direction? So there's going to be a variety of metrics that we track and measure and report on. And I don't know that any one metric says that we were successful, but we should be able to watch trends and also have plenty of qualitative examples too of the stories of impact and the partnerships that are formed out of our work, which is sometimes more meaningful than some numbers on the screen. So those are the two kind of ways we're thinking about it right now.
Okay, and then let me just ask this for more clarification on my end. So, like, let's say housing or childcare, are there are there plans in place to like directly solve that problem from those funds, or is it more of just like a research, like here's what we need to do that, or is there some kind of execution component?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I'll give as examples. So housing, really the advocacy space has been a huge one for us in solving for that, is creating an environment where housing can thrive. So we did, like recently, we brought a crew to testify at City Council on a 260 unit, 60% AMI housing project that we wanted to make sure they heard the good side of this. Like often it's the NIMBYs and the not happening here, right? And we wanted to show up and say, like, we need this. Our businesses need this. And so we had our business community testifying about why this is so critical, and it passed unanimous vote. So those are types of things right now. We also know we have a huge construction defects issue in Colorado. We are looking for creative solutions for housing right now and identifying like real estate, and we're playing in that space. It's early on that front. Childcare has been really exciting. So there's two things that we're really focusing on right now to kind of move the needle. Three things, actually. So the first is a family-friendly workplace certification program. So making sure that all of our employers are recognizing the value of understanding that my kid may walk in this door any second and like, pop in, or what does that look like? How do we become great employers that understand that people are more than just coming in and sitting in their seats? That's one thing we're doing. We've also identified a handful of employers who are willing, interested in putting on-site childcare facilities at their place of business. So next for us is we actually will fund a training program for those employers to be able to figure out what that would take and potentially build additional childcare capacity in that way. And then the third piece that we're looking at is some of those like weird limiting barriers that may exist. And so one of the things we found is we have a local park and rec district, and they could take 100 more kiddos in after school care. That's a lot of kids that currently don't have care. And I know that that's like, my kids are at that age, that's a problem. And so they were telling us this, and we're like, that's silly. Like, we've got to figure out a way to do this. So we brought a school board member, a city council member, the Apex, and our team, and we sat down and we said, okay, what would it take? And then we started to identify nonprofits that could provide transportation from the schools to the Apex centers to potentially, by next fall, get 100 more kids in after school care, which could potentially mean 100 more parents can continue to work. So those are some of the creative strategies that you can't put on paper, but you have to be out having the conversations to find the opportunity. So that's how we're thinking about childcare.
No, that's awesome. And so Kami, thank you so much for sharing all that insight with me. This is definitely a road that I want to go down and pursue. Give me one piece of advice. What's one piece of advice you would give me if I'm interested in pursuing something similar to what you just put together?
Oh my goodness. I always am terrible if I can be just do it, right? No. I obviously, as I said, I learned a lot on the journey. But I think that it's important for chambers to do this work. Like, we are uniquely positioned to be able to take on these critical, challenging issues in our communities. And sometimes it's hard to think about what it's going to look like at the end, but you just have to rip that Band-Aid off and go for it. As I said, I was not confident going into this, but in hindsight, I wish I had been more confident, because the outcome has been amazing, and just the growth and activation and energy for our community has been so awesome. So my advice really is just do it. Just rip the Band-Aid off and do something great and be brave, because it's not easy, but it's the right work.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. And then I think I'm going to see you tomorrow or
Good. I was wondering. Yes. Thursday, right? What is today's Wednesday, isn't it? Tomorrow's Thursday.
Yes.
Yes,
I'm getting on a plane at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning after our state of the city later tonight. So it'll be a fun couple of days, but I'll see you. And let's make sure we touch bases and hang out.
Awesome. Sounds good. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay. Bye.